So in this video, we're going to be talking about how to choose the best protein powder. We're going to talk about all the different types of proteins that exist, how these proteins are made, as well as why so many people have a hard time digesting so many protein supplements. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. Now, when you look at protein supplements as a category of supplements, what you'll notice is that there's pretty much four primary categories of protein, and that would be beef protein, collagen protein, egg protein, and milk protein. And then within milk protein, there's several different types of protein powders within that category itself that we'll talk about later on in this video. But the first one I want to talk about is beef protein isolate. Now, beef protein isolate, as the name denotes, is obviously concentrated from beef and is usually concentrated from the leftovers of beef manufacturing. And because of this, is extremely high in pretty much all of the essential amino acids, as well as extremely high in the branched chain amino acids, which makes it a fantastic choice for anybody who's trying to increase anabolic activity and improve muscle building potential. But it's also very easily digestible and is also extremely low in immune reactivity, which simply means that folks that have autoimmune issues, or if autoimmune issues run in your family and you have allergic responses to other forms of protein, these types of folks typically don't have that type of reaction to beef protein isolate, which makes it a fantastic option for those types of individuals. However, there are a few downsides to beef protein isolate, namely, one, the flavor is kind of weird. Two, it's fairly expensive, or at least more expensive than some of the other options that are out there. And then the third reason is that it's usually just better to just increase your intake of beef as opposed to beef protein isolate. And the reason for that is not only is beef extremely high in essential amino acids and branched chain amino acids, but also extremely high in micronutrients. And so it's usually just a better, more efficient way to increase not just your protein intake, but also your micronutrient intake by simply consuming more beef. Now, the second type of protein supplement that you'll typically find on the shelves of supplement stores is collagen protein. And now collagen is typically extracted from the hide of cows, but it can also be extracted and concentrated from fish sources, marine sources, as well as chicken and sometimes even eggshells. Now, collagen is a fantastic protein source. If you're not consuming a lot of the ligaments, joints, and tendons of animals, it can be a fantastic choice to supplement with a collagen supplement. The reason for this is that collagen is extremely high in the amino acids glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline, which makes it a fantastic choice if you're trying to improve joint health, improve skin health, as well as just overall general health. Now, there are a few downsides to collagen protein, namely that it's extremely low in the branched chain amino acids, which makes it a really poor standalone option as a protein supplement. And the reason for this is that when you're missing the branched chain amino acids, if collagen is really the only protein supplement that you're consuming, and one of your primary goals is to build muscle, collagen really doesn't do a fantastic job of initiating muscle protein synthesis and initiating muscle growth. And because of this, even though it is a great protein supplement option, it's not a great standalone option. Now, the third type of commonly found protein supplement is an egg protein isolate. And obviously, egg protein isolate is extracted and concentrated from eggs, and because of this, is extremely high in all of the essential amino acids as well as the branched chain amino acids, which again makes it a fantastic choice for muscle growth and anabolic activity. However, it is slightly more allergenic than beef protein isolate, which isn't necessarily a huge dog on egg protein isolate, but it is less so allergenic than milk protein sources. And so if you have a milk protein allergy, egg protein and beef protein isolates are typically a good option. Now, another reason that I typically don't recommend my clients take an egg protein isolate is, one, because it's fairly expensive when compared to other forms of protein, and then two, is because if you're already consuming a lot of eggs, like I tend to recommend, you're already getting the amino acid profile that's found in eggs. along with a ton of micronutrients. And so, again, it's a better option usually to simply increase your egg intake as opposed to taking an egg protein isolate. It's more efficient, it's more economical, and is just all around a better option. And this is what brings us to the last type of protein, or at least the last category of protein that you'll typically find, and that is milk proteins. And milk proteins are by far the most common and the most popular protein supplements, and for good reason. The reason for this is that they are extremely high in the branched chain amino acids, and whey protein specifically is the highest protein source of this specific amino acid leucine, which is primarily responsible for the activation and initiation of muscle protein synthesis. Now, another reason I like milk proteins is because they provide a unique amino acid profile that can't really be found in other food sources like meats and eggs and things of that nature. Now, when you look at milk proteins, there are a handful of types of milk proteins, and the first one I want to talk about is milk protein isolate. Now, milk protein isolate, as the name denotes, is simply the protein that's found in milk and is concentrated, a concentrated form of all of the protein that is found in milk. Now, again, has a fantastic amino acid profile, which it makes it a great option for muscle growth. However, the main downside with milk protein isolate is that it's fairly difficult to digest, and because of this, a lot of folks that consume a milk protein isolate experience bloating and digestive upset, and the reason for this is because of the extremely high casein content of the milk protein isolate. Now, the reason that a lot of folks have issues digesting casein protein is one, because of the very nature of casein. It's difficult to digest. It takes several hours to digest, and while it's in your gut, bacteria are able to kind of feed on it and produce gases, and which causes bloating and digestive upset. But another reason why a lot of folks have issues digesting casein protein is because of the types of cows that we typically use over here in the West that produce a very specific type of casein protein that is even more difficult to digest. And then the third reason is that most of the protein supplements that are on the shelves are coming from milks that are pasteurized, and because of this pasteurization process, it somewhat denatures the protein and makes it more difficult for your body to recognize them, absorb them, and digest them. And because of this, they stay in the gut longer and can cause digestive upset. Now, even more so with milk protein isolate typically goes through a further pasteurization process, which then further denatures the proteins and makes them even more difficult to digest. And because of this, milk protein isolates usually have this very distinct chalky flavor to them, and the reason for that is because there's all these casein molecules that are in that protein supplement that have gone through several stages of pasteurization, which have essentially burnt the casein molecules and make them very chalky to the taste, but also make them fairly difficult to digest. Now, the second type of milk protein that you'll typically find is a straight up casein protein isolate. And now, casein proteins typically have many of the same issues that milk protein isolate has, just to an even greater degree, because of the fact that the concentration process of extracting casein from milk protein causes even further degradation of the protein molecules. And while I'm a fairly big fan of casein protein in general, it should be noted that it's usually best to consume casein protein in the form of yogurts and cheeses. And the reason for this is that yogurts and cheese are exposed to bacteria before they are consumed that help to kind of pre-digest the casein molecules before you consume them, which usually makes them fairly digestible. And so if you're looking for casein protein specifically before bed, which it's usually a good idea to take before bed because of the fact that it does take a fairly long time for these proteins to digest and can provide your body with the amino acids that it needs over the evening time for recovery, it usually is a better option to just simply simply, again, consume things like cheese and yogurt instead. Now, the last type of milk protein that I want to talk about is by far the most popular, and that is whey protein. And now whey protein is also found in milk protein, just to a smaller degree when compared to things like casein protein, which constitutes most of the protein that's found in milk. However, whey protein is found in milk and is usually a byproduct of the cheese making process. And so what cheese making does is to kind of like concentrate the casein proteins that are found in milk to create the cheese. And when you do this, the whey proteins are kind of just left over, and then manufacturers will take this leftover whey protein and kind of process it further to create whey protein supplements. Now, in its unprocessed form, whey protein is far less allergenic and is far more digestible when compared to casein protein. However, because it oftentimes comes from pasteurized milk and is oftentimes processed in a very similar way to casein protein, it still can cause digestive upset in some individuals. However, there are some processing methods that can minimize this effect, which is why I also want to talk about the different types of whey protein that exist as well. Now, the first type of whey protein that I want to talk about is by far the least processed version of whey protein, and that is native whey. Now, native whey protein is actually extracted from milk before the cheese making process. And the reason this is typically a good thing is that there are two means by which milk proteins can be denatured. One is through the pasteurization process, which pretty much all whey proteins are exposed to. And the second way is through the cheese making process. When you add the rennet to milk in order to separate the curds and the whey, this process does cause somewhat of a denaturing of both the casein proteins and the whey proteins. And so by extracting the whey protein before the cheese making process, you can actually avoid the denaturing that occurs during the cheese making process. Now, native whey is also fairly concentrated in protein. It doesn't have a lot of the other milk components that come along with a lot of other whey proteins. However, the biggest downside to native whey proteins is that they are extremely difficult to find. There are a few brands out there that make a really good native whey protein. However, it should be noted that they're also cut with other types of protein. And so it's really difficult to find a pure native whey. And so if anyone knows where to get some, please let me know. But other than native whey, there's also another good option, which is simply raw whey protein. Now, raw whey protein is exposed to the cheese making process. However, it's not exposed to the further processing, the concentration processing that all the other types of whey proteins are exposed to. And because of this, it does tend to retain many of the fat-soluble compounds, the fat-soluble vitamins, the cholesterols, the sugars, the micronutrients, the immunoglobulins, and the bioactive peptides that are found in milk. And because of this is one of my favorite proteins. Yes, it is exposed to the cheese making process, but it's also not exposed to most of the other concentration processing that most of the other whey proteins that are on this list are exposed to. Now, there's also whey protein concentrate, which obviously is just a more concentrated form of whey protein. Manufacturers take whey protein or raw whey protein and simply concentrate the protein molecules that are found in the raw whey to create a more concentrated form of whey protein, which has its place in certain circumstances for certain individuals. However, by and large, going with a raw whey protein is going to carry more benefits for most individuals, in that it's going to reduce bloating, reduce digestive upset, and reduce gas. And so unless you are just super interested in finding the most concentrated form of protein, going with a raw whey protein is usually a better bet than going with a whey protein concentrate. And then there's also whey protein isolate, which is simply a more isolated and concentrated form of whey protein concentrate, which goes through a further processing step to isolate the protein molecules that are found in whey and to concentrate them into the protein supplement itself, which again has its place in certain contexts, but again, because it is being further processed, sometimes can cause further digestive upset in some individuals that are predisposed to having bad reactions to whey protein. Now, there's also whey protein hydrolysate, which usually takes either a whey protein concentrate or a whey protein isolate and metabolizes these proteins via an enzyme, which sometimes this actually can be a good thing. It can kind of pre-digest the protein molecules and make them more readily absorbed and cause less digestive upset in some individuals. However, if you're looking for something that's going to be absorbed better, going with a native whey or a raw whey is typically a better option just because it's just less processed. And then there's also grass-fed whey, which, to be quite frank, is usually just a marketing ploy. And the reason for this is that a cow being grass-fed usually only affects the fat content of their milk production, not the amino acid production. And so when you have an end product, say, of like a whey protein isolate or whey protein concentrate, the amino acid profile of that whey protein is the exact same as a non-grass-fed whey. Now, where this does make a difference is if you're consuming something like a raw whey protein that still has some of the fat left in it. Choosing a grass-fed option in that type of circumstance actually can provide some benefits because you're ensuring that you're getting a grass-fed milk that produces the fat that's in the whey protein that you're consuming. Now, I also think I would be fairly remiss if I didn't mention some of the additives that are also added into a lot of whey proteins. And the first one that I want to talk about is the sweeteners that are added, specifically artificial sweeteners. Now, most people don't have an immediate reaction to artificial sweeteners, and so most artificial sweeteners aren't going to tear you up and cause diabetes or something crazy like that. However, there's a lot that we just simply don't know about artificial sweeteners, and so until we do, I typically like to recommend that most of my clients stay away from artificial sweeteners. And to be quite frank, I prefer the taste of things like stevia and monk fruit that may not have as much research as well, but are at least a little bit more natural and have a lesser potential for side effects. And so because of this, it's usually a better option to simply avoid artificial sweeteners and opt for things that use more natural sweeteners. Now, there are also things like thickeners that a lot of manufacturers like to throw in their whey protein to kind of make it feel better and have a better mouth feel to it, and these would be things like xanthan gum and carrageenan that actually can cause some digestive upset in some individuals. And so if you again are somebody who is experiencing some gut-related side effects from consuming a whey protein, trying to find one that doesn't contain xanthan gum or any of the other types of gums or carrageenans that are used in order to thicken the whey protein can be a good option. Now, a lot of supplement manufacturers, even some of the raw manufacturers, will also put in a lecithin type of compound, either soy or sunflower lecithin, in order to allow the milk proteins to redissolve into water. And some people like to say that they have massive, crazy reactions to lecithins. I personally find that I don't react negatively to them. I actually have a bag of lecithin at my house that I'll use and put into my protein shakes just because it gives a better mouthfeel, helps the protein, the raw proteins especially that don't have lecithin in them, helps them to dissolve into water and just gives a better drinking experience. And because a lot of lecithins seem to be at least very benign in their actions, I usually don't have a fairly big issue with consuming a whey protein that has any type of lecithin in it. Now, with all of that being said, I also want to briefly mention some of my favorite brands that I like to personally consume, and that would be Native Whey, Raw Whey, and Whey Factors. And I'm not affiliated with these brands whatsoever. I just personally enjoy consuming them. I do find that when I consume a typical whey protein supplement that I get a lot of bloating, digestive upset, and even some skin issues, but I do not find that when I consume a more raw or native type of whey protein supplement. And so the main benefits that I get from consuming these are just a better digestive experience as well as less immune reactivity. And so these are my favorites. Now, if you guys are interested in buying any of those, I am partnered with a really cool company that can give you guys a 10% discount on pretty much not just those whey proteins, but hundreds and hundreds of other supplement brands called Fullscript. And so there will be a link in the description for that where you guys can save a little bit of money on purchasing some of those. But other than that, guys, that's pretty much all I have for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. But other than that, I will see you guys next time.